Hello, here's today's installment of the stuff that I've been working on lately. So, I am continuing this process of looking at near death experiences that have been classified as distressing. So, anything that includes a lot of hellscape, fear, terror, entrapment, demons, devils, all of that stuff, that's what I'm looking at because when you look at near death experiences that are relatively normal, I guess I would say, they don't include that imagery. So the question becomes then, where does that imagery come from? What is it? And I've written an entire book about it. And what I'm looking at today is from the NDERF, so the Near Death Experience Research Foundation. They have a website where anybody can show up and include. It's like, did you have a near death experience? Tell us about it here. So it's self-reporting. Okay. They don't give you the name. You don't know exactly who the individual is. It's just like first name and last initials. So in this case, it's Jason D, and he reports his own experience. Now, the problem with that is it's not like it's YouTube. Like, you don't have 6, 8, 10, 15, 30 different accounts of the same person given the same account to different interviewers or something like that. It's one guy shows up, types in his experience, answers some questions, and then it goes into the database. So it's a one-off. That's part of the problem. So, in this case, Jason, now the date here goes back to, November 26th of 2020. And Jason is a self-reported heroin addict. So he uses heroin all the time, every day. Now that becomes important later, and I'll touch on that when we get there. So he gets out of bed, or he wakes up in the morning. His girlfriend is next to him asleep on the bed, and he shoots up. And he shoots a load of heroin that was from a new supplier that was unknown to him. And according to him, he knew that something was wrong immediately. It just hit him so hard. So he literally had time to reach over and smack his girlfriend and get one word out, help, before he went away. Now, according to her, she sees that he's passed out. She administered eventually a total of 5 doses of Narcan, and she's doing CPR on him to try to resuscitate him, and his skin turned blue, his lips turned purple, and he was dead. So after 5 doses of Narcan, she's eventually able to get him back. So he wakes up. Now, what I've been evaluating here are things that primarily classified as comas. I don't think you could call this a coma. I think this is just an overdose, and he died, and then he came back. So it's not really a coma, but he was clinically dead, for a period of time. Now, what did he report as part of that? So he says instantly he was catapulted down. So it wasn't like he had an out-of-body experience, where he drifted above his body and he can see his body. The classic out-of-body experience that you would relate to a near-death experience, it's like normal. This is just like, doink, he's in a hole. And he describes it as a tunnel, but it's a deep tunnel. It's down, it's under, and it's filled with water, and he's drowning. Okay, so it's just another scary thing. The fact that it's dark, you're in a tunnel, you're underground, it's full of water, and you're drowning. That's 100% fear. Okay, so that's fear-based kinds of things. He said there was a sound to it. He could describe sounds that were pain, anger, anguish, despair. It just all kinds of things that he could hear. And it was taunting, and it was aimed at someone. So those are also the kinds of things that you just don't normally see in near-death experiences. And then there were things in the water that were trying to pull him down. In other words, we want you to come with us, and we're going to drown you, and we're going to murder you. Again, fear-based, negative. All right. The message that they were transmitting to him was, you belong here with us. So in other words, you're coming with us. Now, the point that I ran into during this evaluation, that I had been using telepathic communication as a key indicator of near-death experience things. So when I ran into Jason's account, I went, okay, so here's a guy who doesn't really look like it's NDE stuff, but he's reporting telepathic communication. So I took a stop right in the middle of this analysis of this report, and I went back and looked at the reports of people that are just in comas or in ICU psychosis scenarios, and the concept of telepathic communications with people, things, people, or entities, or what have you, from those hellish reports. And again, things that are not reported as NDEs, don't have anything to do with the NDE data, just medical analysis of people who were in comas or who had been sedated during ICU. It's there. So it's a common element for people that are just, their brains are in a coma or sedated or what have you. So I've scratched that. The idea of telepathic communication as being an indicator of an NDE, not valid. Okay, it's just something that the brain can either generate or perceive or what have you. So anyway, I'm putting that aside. Let's see. Oh, the other thing to remember too here is that typically when you have someone who overdoses and dies because of the overdose, and then they cross over and they do the out of body, maybe they run into a spirit guide, then they go into the void, and then there's a tunnel, and then there's the bright white light, and they're talking to God, and all of that typical near-death experience stuff. For the most part, maybe they're on a load of drugs and they've overdosed before that starts. But then the instant that they're dead and they cross over, their brain clears up, because I always say you can drug a brain, but you can't drug a soul. Okay? In Jason's situation here, this is a little different, because Jason is a habitual drug user. He's an addict. He's been using this stuff for years. And for drug users like this, they're not really using to get high at this point. They're using to not go into withdrawal, if that makes any sense. So it's a maintenance load. So you have to keep shooting up if you're a drug addict, especially if you're a heroin addict, in order to not go into to suffer from withdrawal symptoms. It's not like you're trying to get high anymore. You're just trying not to go into withdrawal. I know that sounds backwards, but that's what happens. So anyway, in this case, the whole drug a brain, drug a soul thing doesn't really apply, because it's Jason here. It's a guy who does a lot of drugs and is not necessarily under the influence of those drugs. It's just he's trying to keep his body juiced up so that he doesn't go into withdrawal. Okay. So then eventually he clawing back up is how he described it. And then he comes out of he wakes back up, comes back alive. All right. So now I rated this on the Winter FCE scale, and it's relatively short. It's relatively weak. For example, he's not in a coma. There's no coma. There's no Glasgow scale of coma rating. So I've got this rated as a possible, bordering on probable fear coma experience. But again, this isn't a coma, it's an overdose. But it's got the hellscape stuff, and it's in the NDE Research Foundation data, and they have it rated as with a couple of points for NDE. I think they gave it an 8, just because he said the word coma, or just because he said the word tunnel, and just because he said the word telepathic. That was basically where the points came from. And I just don't see it that way. I just don't see that as being anything, nothing about this. Oh, the other thing was the escape. He's in the tunnel and he gets revived because of the Narcan. I just don't, that's not the same thing as, because the way the near-death experience rating on the Grayson scale is supposed to work is the idea that you're on the other side, you're having a near-death experience, and then you're encouraged to return to life. Right? The fact that this guy is struggling to climb out of this flooded tunnel, that it's a completely different interpretation. So I don't think that those points that they scored him with an 8 on the NDE scale, I don't think that's accurate or valid. So anyway, the way I read this is not a near-death experience at all, and it might not even be a fear coma experience either. It's an overdose with some hellish sceneries. Now, what can that tell you? That can tell you that if you do overdose, then your brain, which is alive, interesting point. Maybe not alive, because the dude was dead. Okay, interesting. I think I just shot my whole video right out of the water. All right, well, let's take another look at this and see what comes up. Okay, here's what I come up with, all right? Oh my God, I'm going to need my glasses for this. All right, so there's all kinds of things going on here, okay? First of all, he had the overdose, he loses consciousness, he has respiratory failure, cardiac arrest, and then he's resuscitated. All right. His subjective experience, the things that he reports, could have occurred at anywhere during that sequence. All right. It could have occurred as he was transitioning into cardiac arrest. It could have occurred as his circulation was being restored during CPR, or when the Narcan starts to kick in, or it's possibly that parts of it could have occurred during different points that he subsequently remembered those as one continuous narrative. And what I can't tell you is that there's an exact down to the second timestamp of when all of this occurred. Now, the other problem is that when you say dead in a resuscitation context, it doesn't necessarily mean that he was instantaneously resuscitated. And it also doesn't mean that he was instantaneously dead. That there is some residual brain activity as you're dying, and blood stops pumping and the brain doesn't get the oxygen it needs. Again, that's the oxygen deprivation part of it. And then there's CPR going on, so maybe he was getting some blood in there, because I ran up against this thing myself as I was talking through it. I was like, because I was trying to say, or about to say, or I was going to say, remember, as part of a fear coma experience, if your brain is alive, that's where all of this negative imagery comes from. I was like, wait a minute, this dude was dead. Okay, so how does that parse? How does that work out? How do you build that? So you got to look at it in context. And again, this thing took a couple of minutes. It wasn't like he was in a coma for a week and a half or 3 weeks, which most comic people, that generally it's a much longer period of time. Just the fact that I'm trying to apply this fear coma experience framework against a relatively brief overdose in which someone was dead, was Narcaned, was resuscitated, and came back to life. I don't think that this particular framework or architecture is holding up very well against this particular case. That's okay. That's fine. I don't care. I'm not in love with any of this. I'm just simply saying that if you step back and look at this, okay, here's a dude that overdosed, clearly had negative hellscape imagery. There's none of the what you would expect to see as a peaceful, happy-go-lucky, go see God, go through the tunnel, have a life review, a near-death experience. He reported it himself on a near-death experience website, and it's only one time, one report. Hey, listen, it is what it is. I'm figuring this stuff out as I go along, and this one, just, I don't know, chalk it up as one more. Who knows? Good, bad, ugly, clean, clear? No. Little muddy? Sure. Why not? Still not an NDE. Anyway, it is what it is. Thank you very much for watching. I know that was weird and stupid, but that's okay. It happens. That's life. Thank you very much. Oh, like, follow, share, social media crap. There you go. Thanks. Bye. How do I turn this off?